First of all, I apologise profusely for any mess you see in front of me. So today I'm here to do my December wrap up. I'm also going to be talking a little bit about reading goals and stuff for the year. I do have sort of a compilation of books that I would like to read in 2020, but I've not really honed in on that and finished that list yet, so I may see that as a separate video, or I may even just tag it on my January wrap up when I get to do that. So just quickly before I forget, I want to do a reading breakdown. So I read 0 library loans, 11 physical books. I say that because I'm currently reading a comic at the minute, but I probably will finish that a little after I finish filming this video. I have read 1 magazine, 1 loan from my family, 0 Kindle, and overall I have read 11 books. So I would say it's been a really productive reading month for me so far. For this month really. I'm filming this on the 31st, so New Year's Eve, and I think I'm probably only going to squeeze in that last book that I'm going to finish just after this video. So without any further ado, let's quickly race into that. So let's start from the books that I read first, the ones that I finished up with. So the first book I read was Dorothy Must Die by Danielle Page. Now this one is sort of like a post-apocalyptic return to Oz telling. We come back and basically we're following this other character. She's called Amy. She finds herself in Oz in not too like dissimilar ways that Dorothy originally found herself in Oz, but she comes here and everyone fears Dorothy. She is kind of turned into this crazy dictator, stealing all like the magic for herself, and basically it comes down to the fact that Dorothy must die. So unfortunately I did give this a 2 out of 5 stars. I will say in terms of prose, I was glad that we saw this sort of broken, sort of dystopian, post-apocalyptic kind of Oz sooner rather than later. Because I think that is, for me, it's saving grace. That was the only thing that I was sort of interested in when it came to this story. I really liked Gert and Mombi as characters, and I wish we got a little bit more from them. I would say in terms of cons, it was very repetitive. In terms of sentences, I saw a lot of things like brought up again, and I was like, oh, I've read this line like literally a couple of pages ago, and it was just a bit frustrating. It felt more juvenile than I was expecting. I do believe it's a YA book. Sorry, I'm fixing my high-waisted jeans. And I read a lot of YA, but I just found like it read a little bit too young for me. I don't know if I'm just changing in terms of my tastes or what, or if I just expected coming into a theme like this it would have been a bit more heavy and hard going. I don't know, maybe that was my fault for, I don't know, assuming, I guess. And I did feel like we were having a lot of forced relationships, and that was just another thing that bothered me. I will say I will be continuing with this because I think technically it is a duology, and I do have the second book, and then I believe there's 2 other books that you can read from this series, but they're like prequels, so in my mind they're like optional. So if I do decide that I like it enough after reading the second book, I might just go ahead and buy those last 2 if I find them for cheap, or borrow them from the library or something. So yeah, it's not a lot of time that I would say I'm invested in this, so I wouldn't mind just finishing it. I also find it difficult to DNF things anyway, so that's a problem I need to work on. After that, I read and finished Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. Now this one was fascinating. It's a graphic novel memoir following this girl, Marjane, who moves from, I believe it's Iran. Yeah, she moves from Iran, and she's kind of like, basically you're following it in 2 parts. I don't know if originally it was brought out as the 2 stories separately, like the story of a childhood and then the story of a return, or if they were always together like this, but we're following in the first sort of volume, I'd just call it volume, her kind of moving out and leaving Iran, and like basically she's growing up in a time where it's becoming very strict and censored, and you're seeing her having to change how she dresses, how she presents herself, and then she moves away into a complete different country and kind of trying to get back into that normality and also that different culture shock and stuff like that. And then obviously the story of a return is her coming back to Iran years later and kind of reflecting on what she's learned, her relationships with her family and that sort of thing. I gave this a 4 stars. I still haven't checked out the film yet, but I am still kind of looking for it to see if I can just do like a little comparison thing. I feel like this one definitely solidified my general enjoyment of graphic novel memoirs. I believe this is like the 3rd or 4th one of these that I've read now, and I find that I just really enjoy reading memoirs in that way. I find it very interesting to see expressions and to see, you know, thoughts and feelings, as opposed to just reading, which is also very powerful, but seeing it how the author and the person that's been through this wants you to see it. It's something else entirely, I would say. I really appreciated the conversations we had on religion, politics, terrorism, from an individual who grew up in a very stereotyped and censored country. So yeah, it was cool to see how she thought about this, what her opinions were, her thoughts and feelings, as well as how she saw other people's thoughts and feelings towards her coming from a country that she came from, basically. I loved seeing how Marge's opinions grew and altered and changed as she herself grew and altered and changed. Experiences were very interesting to witness, as well as her experience and appreciating different cultures as well. I say my one con is kind of her as a person, and this is a difficult one, especially when you're like reviewing a memoir, which is very hard to do because it's someone's life. But her as a person I found dislikable, honestly. I think she was very I found this in when I read Mouse as well by Art Spiegelman. I think it's very brave them staying true to how they are and writing how they acted, some of the things that they did that I personally wouldn't agree with, and although I appreciated that, it still didn't lessen the fact that I disliked some of the things she did, like the way she treated some people, what she thought was funny that wasn't, things like that. She's probably someone that I personally, from just this experience alone, would have a problem with, if you know what I mean, like just some of the mean things that she did to people to get out of, I don't know, it's difficult if you don't know what I mean. But there's a very particular instance in this memoir that I'm thinking of that bothered me, and her grandma actually told her off for it, so it's just something like that. But yeah, I would say definitely check this out if you haven't. I think it's a very interesting read, and an important read as well. So there's that. Next up, I read a fun one. This is The Magical Unicorn Society, The Golden Unicorn Secrets and Legends by Selwyn E. Phillips. Is it Phillips or Phipps? I can't remember. But basically, I had earlier in the year read this one, which was the original. This is the Magic Unicorn Society official handbook, and then I saw that they had this one, and I picked it up, and I just enjoyed it for what it was. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. I find the illustrations absolutely gorgeous. I've had someone asking me to recommend more books that are similar to this, so I'm on the lookout on my shelves to see if I've forgotten anything, because she thinks it looks cute, and I think she is going to have a child soon, so this is very child friendly. I adored the short stories we got of this, detailing sort of sightings of these unicorns, and kind of like almost like their first sightings, and how these people influenced the unicorn society of today. I loved it. There's also a fun quiz at the back, and honestly I have no cons. I will continuously buy these books if they keep producing more. I am loving them so far. They are so much fun for unicorn lovers everywhere. No matter your age, you'll find this incredibly enchanting, I am sure. Then I read The Little Book of Crystals, Crystals to Attract Love, Wellbeing and Spiritual Harmony into Your Life by Judy Hall. This one I gave a 5 out of 5 stars also. I found it really refreshing to have some different crystals talked about in a beginner's book. I would still very much call myself a beginner in terms of crystals and their properties and things like that. So when I do read a lot of these beginner books that I generally navigate to because I am a beginner, I always come across the same kind of crystals, and that's good in itself that it helps me remember things, but it's nice to see someone sort of thrust into your viewpoint a different set of crystals that isn't heavily talked about, but it still would help a beginner, if you know what I mean. I feel like it would be very helpful in terms of quick referencing. I feel like this would be something I'd happily take into a crystal shop, because it's detailed yet digestible, so you could have a little flick through if there's something you're trying to remember, or something that you'd like a bit more information on, or you're looking at a crystal and you're wondering if it's in here. I feel like it would help in that respect. It has very calming, and like it just has a general calming vibe to it, and helpful illustrations as well, like how it tells you what the crystal is best for in terms of like chakras, like whereabouts in your body it would be best. And there's like little positions for you of where you should wear things and stuff like that, and then just little illustrations of the crystals themselves. I just find it a really cute little book, really helpful. I got it in like the works last year maybe for a couple of pounds, and it's definitely going to be something I can quickly reference back to quite a few times over my life, and I have no cons. I think it was a very enjoyable book. I also read this little one. It was the World Book Days book for 2015 I think, but I'm pretty sure I purchased this last year, or maybe, yeah, I think it was last year, or maybe this year. And this is Killing the Dead by Marcus Sedgwick. Now I was a little bit confused because it seems like there's another book with a similar name in this, which made me think maybe you had to read that book first. But I don't think that was the case, so I just went ahead and read it. So we're basically following this newly qualified teacher, I guess he is. He's quite a young teacher, and he goes to work at this all-girls school, and there's a few sort of hushed tones and secrets of something that happened at this like ceremony that they do every year, where they have like this one girl chosen to sort of honour the school, and basically there was a death. And there's kind of secrets surrounding that. There's also a bit of a forbidden, strange romance as well. So this is definitely a world day book for slightly older readers, because it does have a little bit of, yeah, it even says it has a bit of, not mature content, but the topics that are talked about are quite, I wouldn't want to give this to a child, basically. I gave this a 4 stars actually. I'd say it's very haunting and eerie, so it was strange to read a book like this at this time of year. I know a lot of people tend to go for the more festive, wintry, happy reads, but it was nice to have a break from some of the happy sort of, for example, like my Illogical read. Even though I didn't read very like festive books, it was nice to have a slightly darker tone thrown in there just to break it up a little bit. I ended up craving more, so I would definitely go on the hunt and look for more of this author's books just to see, especially if there's something else to do within this world, this school, and this kind of haunting aspect. And it left me shocked at where the plot went as well, so it was definitely an unexpected read for me. I'd say for a con, at a push, there were some really dislikable characters. For example, Margot and Mr. Drake. But I guess it's one of those things again where it worked for them and their plot development and their character development, but sometimes I personally, if I dislike a character, I find it a little bit difficult to enjoy the content generally, because I dislike the character even though I fully understand that that's the point. So it's just a little bit of a catch-22 there. After that I picked up a comic. This is the SpiderMan Cross Deadpool Volume 1, Isn't It Romantic? So this one I ended up giving a 3 stars. I'd say the humour is absolutely amazing. What can you expect when you throw Deadpool in there? I love his fourth wall breaking, and I always thought, like back when I first started getting into like comics and like superheroes and stuff, I thought I was one of those girls that thought Spider-Man and Deadpool were like supposed to be the same character. So then after that I was obsessed, and I was like, please put them in like some sort of spin-off, but I didn't know that there was things, basically, yeah, it exists, and I was happy to find this one day, and I got a few volumes. I appreciated the detailed art as well. It didn't feel too disjointed, because I think there's a different artist per each issue, and it didn't feel too like jarred and different in terms of styles, which is cool. And definitely it's just a fun team up all around. I would say though it's very confusing in terms of plots. There is a volume before this, it's just called Volume 0. I don't know if it's a prequel or just a random slapdash of issues just combined. But I felt like I had to kind of go back. I don't have that volume, and I felt like I was missing something, that I should have gone back and looked harder to find that, because it made me think that I was missing out things. And then they did a flashback in it at the beginning, and I was like, oh, maybe this will help clear up some confusion, but it still didn't. So I don't know what really I'm missing. Maybe there's just a gap in my knowledge of these two as a team and separately. I don't know. I'm not like the most schooled person on superheroes, but I do love a bit of Marvel and a bit of DC actually. I used to be a DC girl, but I would say I've definitely seen more and read more Marvel content than I have DC, which is strange. Anyway, the art, even though I really enjoyed the way it looked and the designs, I would say that was still also very overwhelming, especially in the beginning couple of issues, when I was already so confused by the story itself, and the art was just a bit too in your face, even though very beautifully done. Just quickly, the comic, or the book, yeah, the comic that I'm currently reading is Volume 2 to that. I will probably be finishing this. It's looking like a 3 stars as well. I'm enjoying it so far. It might even push to a 3.5, maybe 4. You guys will see that on Goodreads when it goes up. But I might just drop a little bit of my thoughts in the description once I finish this, or come back in video form and insert it. I completely just smashed this into my bookshelf. I'm sorry. But yes, this one is called Volume 2 Side Pieces, and so far I'm really enjoying it. I've only got like 2 more issues in this volume to complete. Moving on now, I finally read The Light Between Oceans by M.L. Stedman. This was loaned and then just given to me by my friend Maria like 3 years ago, and I finally got around to read this. I haven't watched the film yet though. She's loaned it to me on DVD, which is nice, so hopefully I can check that out soon. But wow, this was amazing. It was beautiful. I gave this a 4 stars. So we're following Tom and Izzy as they live their lives on a very remote conditions. They live on a lighthouse, and they are basically just having a very quiet, simple life, running the lighthouse, making sure that sailors out in sea are safe from the rocks, stuff like that. But we're following their very complex relationship as they have this boat kind of washed up to shore, and in this boat is a dead man and a crying baby, and they make a decision of what to do with this evidence in front of them, and that decision kind of changes their lives forever, and how they view each other, how they view themselves with what they've done, and how everybody around them when they go to the mainland kind of treat them and stuff like that. So it is an amazing story, so unique, but I believe it's something that could happen, like it might have happened in real life, and I don't know, it sounds amazing. I don't know if it's based on a real story, I didn't see that anywhere, but I feel like it could be. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those stories. I'd say it's definitely a very emotional, moving story. It had, as I've already briefly said, a great exploration of a very complex storyline, fantastic character study making me question right and wrong. I will say it definitely annoyed me on poor communication between Izzy and Tom, which are like the couple that we're following that live on the lighthouse. Izzy's flippant childish ways are very irritating. Next up, I read Animal Farm. I actually read this over a course of a couple of days because it's more dense in storytelling than you would well, I knew it was going to be a denser read, but it's a tiny book and you would have thought it might have been quicker, which kind of was, and I guess it could be, but it had a lot of food for thought that made me take my time with it a little bit more. But yeah, this is Animal Farm by George Orwell. So we're basically following a farm that gets rebelled by all the animals living on there. They take over and they want to make a better life for all animals. And obviously, well, I mean it's obvious from the back, but they begin to get corrupt. It's starting to become an imbalance of equality, and other animals are treated poorer than others. So I gave this one 4 stars. I am so glad that I ended up reading this. It was enjoyably unsettling, which is a bit of a contrast, but basically I had read this, or a part of it, in like year 8 years ago, and I never knew if I finished it, because we weren't really doing it for GCSE or nothing, because I weren't in that year yet, and I just felt like I needed to complete it or read it as an adult, or just both, and I'm glad that I left it this kind of time to read it, because I appreciate it more. That was a bit of a tangent. I will say that I found it interesting to be able to compare with 1984, which I read, I want to say last month or the month prior. The manipulation in this was also very, very clever. I did feel like at times though it was a bit of a copy and paste from 1984, because there are a lot of similar themes, and I think it's an important message to, you know, keep discussing, because it's relevant even now, but it's just not a lot of new ideas. I'm not sure which book was written or published before the other, but it just felt too samey, but just on a farm with animals instead of human beings. I don't know, it's a bit of a weird one, but I really did enjoy this, and again the message is very important. So coming up to the end now for the actual wrap up, I finished Finally Womankind. This is edited by Antonia Case, if I remember correctly. This is issue number 19, Flamingo or Cuba. Flamingo is like the theme, but it's talking a lot about Cuban heritage and life on Cuban islands. So I gave this a 5 stars. My heritage is also Cuban as well. One of my grandparents is Cuban, so it was fascinating just to learn a little bit more what life's actually like there, because I have no knowledge really about Cuba or anything like that. The Letters to Cuba particularly was very eye-opening. I preferred the kindness challenge that we had in this instead of the cooking challenge. I liked that. Usually I get a little bit bogged down and I enjoy the cooking challenge for a couple of pages and then it just drags on. The kindness challenge was just so refreshing to have. And as usual, some beautiful artwork in here, whether it's photography or like drawings and illustrations, absolutely stunning. And I have no cons for this. And then lastly, I finished Highly Illogical Behaviour by John Corey Whaley. My cousin recently loaned this to me, as she loaned a few books to me, and this was fantastic. So we're following like 3 main characters, but really we're reading from the perspective of 2. So we've got Solomon, who hasn't left the house in 3 years. He has agoraphobia. We have Lisa, who wants to save him. We have Clark, who will do anything for the one he loves. It's amazing. Basically, Lisa comes into Solomon's life and everything changes, his outlook on life changes, but it's tinged with a motive, and you find out that motive really soon, but I don't want to like spoil it just in case you prefer to go in knowing very little. I don't know if you can hear that, but my fridge is going off and my cat's licking a bag. But I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars. It was a fantastic read. I'm so glad it was one of the last books that I read this year, because it's definitely left my head whirling basically. I love the discussion on mental health that we had here, particularly for me. This might be triggering for you, but it does go into depth a little bit about panic attacks, and actually you see a character having the panic attacks. And for me, I talked a little bit about this more in my written review, but I felt like really understood through it. Like it just was, you know, bang on the hit the hammer. Wait, what is the saying? It was bang on basically. For personally how I feel when it comes to these sort of things, I don't have it as bad at all. I don't have exactly what Solomon has, but some of the things it mentions about anxiety and panic attacks and stuff like that was just spot on. Character growth in this were absolutely amazing, and there was an excellent main plot development, so it's an all-round good book. But I will say that the subplot itself was predictable. I've pretty much guessed it straight away. Reading a little bit about it on the back, literally those 3 sentences, I was like, okay, I bet this is going to happen, and it kind of worked that way, but went in a slightly different direction, and I just couldn't get rid of my uncomfort in regards to Lisa. It stayed with me. But other than that, a fantastic book. Now, just quickly, I want to whiz on to some updates about the year. So I didn't end up finishing all the books I had in my list, so if I just go back to that, so I did have a 2019 TBR here. As you can see, there's a lot of uncoloured books that I didn't get to read, which I'm fine with, because I still managed to read, I think if I finish that comic that I'll probably finish tonight, I believe it's 92 books, and my Goodreads goal was 70, so I surpassed that, but I kind of secretly wanted to hit 100. However, this is the closest that I've ever been, I believe, so I'm really happy with that, to be fair. I also failed in my Pop Sugar reading challenge for 2019. To be fair, I only had a couple of books left to read on that, so I'm not upset about it, to be honest. I'll probably just carry on reading some of these books as I go throughout the new year. And as I mentioned already, I do have a top books I want to read from my collection in 2020, but I might talk about that a little bit later in the year, even though it'll probably be relevant then. So the bookish goals I have for 2020, it's only a few. Some of these are recurring goals from last year, as I did lose a little bit of motivation, but I'm hoping the more specific points that I talk about here will help. So number 1 is to focus extra hard on my Kindle and NetGalley books. Number 2 is to get through my magazine subscriptions as much as possible. Number 3 is to complete these series, so A Throne of Glass, Harry Potter, Trials of Apollo, The Priestess of the White, and Deep Blue. So maybe one book from each series a month, depending on how it plays out. 4 is to complete the remaining books on my Pop Sugar reading challenge from 2019 and do a wrap up for them, even though that'll probably be irrelevant at that point. You can see my cat up there, she should not be up there. 5 is to slow down on my book buying, which is crazy because I think I've got a haul to cut up maybe after this one. And 6, if I want to do a TBR, to focus more on seasonal ones, as there's less pressure for me as a mood reader. So that is wrapping it up for this video now. I hope you have a fantastic new year. Let me know some of your goals for 2019. Wait, throwing it back. 2020 for this new decade. Let me know if you've got any personal goals, just reading goals, those sort of things. And let me know what you've been reading this month as well. So yeah, I will speak to you in another video soon. Bye.